Good afternoon to you. Well, we lead this hour with a story making international headlines. The British Prime Minister, Liz Truss, resigning in just the last half an hour. Her announcement outside number 10 Downing Street a short while ago comes just over a month after she took office.
I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. This morning I met the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. We've agreed that there will be a leadership election to be completed within the next week. This will ensure that we remain on a path to deliver our fiscal plans and maintain our country's economic stability and national security. I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen.
Truss took office just on the 6th of September as the replacement for Boris Johnson, who also had to resign from office. Well, we're joined now by Musa Mdunge, a political analyst based at the University of Dundee in the UK. Musa, good afternoon to you. I mean, a period of utter chaos in British politics. Did Liz Truss have any other choice?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and to your viewers. She did not have a choice. I think the writing was on the wall. Yesterday, events moved so quickly. It's unbelievable. From having to defend herself in the House of Commons to that very interesting vote on fracking, where there were allegations of Conservative bench backers being bullied into voting and supporting the government. And there was lack of clarity on whether the chief whip had resigned or stayed on, and then to put the nail on the coffin, the resignation of the Home Secretary, Sowavela Braverman. This is really unheard of at this level, where a British government just falls apart. And I fear that regardless of who the Conservatives place as the next leader, it's too late for them in 2024, and it is likely that by 2024, King Charles III will welcome his third Prime Minister.
In just such a short period of time. Musa, this is perhaps an impossible question. What happens next? There has to be an election. I mean, and just to sort of put this into context, this may be slightly cruel, but Liz Truss was in power as Prime Minister for a shorter period of time than the last Conservative Party leadership election took.
Yes, this is very shocking. What a sad story for Liz Truss and her supporters. Of course, we know that, the Conservative Party has decided that the 1922 committee, Bench-Backers Committee, has decided that there will be a new Prime Minister by next week. And what is expected to happen is that the threshold for candidates to stand will be increased from, what was the case in the first election contest of about 30 MPs to support your bid or to nominate. And this time we expect it to increase. But we know that behind the scenes, there has been negotiations, there's conversation of a Rishi Sunak Penny Mordaunt ticket. There's also calls by some for Boris Johnson to make a return. Of course, there's also the third option, which is to choose a candidate who sits outside of the political fray as it stands. And one candidate who comes up is the Defense Secretary, Ben Wallace, who didn't stand in the Conservative contestation previously. So these are the sort of divisions and discussions that are happening in the Conservative Party. But there's a need, ahead of the October 31st statement by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, for there to be a Prime Minister in seat.
Musa, there's another angle to all of this, which is that probably the best option for the Conservative Party right now is an uncontested election, which means what I would call smoke-filled room politics, right? No one votes. Everybody gets together and says, okay, who will you accept? Who will you accept? People come out with envelopes. There'll be very interesting WhatsApp groups. I imagine they'll use Telegram for this. But that would be a better outcome for the Conservatives. Not democratic, better for them, though.
Yes, it may be better for them, and I think in what is happening right now is almost actually what you are describing. I think behind closed doors, what you are likely to see is either one or two or just one candidate whom everybody can agree to, and those are the type of negotiations that will take place. Now, by having, of course, this election now in the next week, it is with that knowledge that had this gone back to the party members, you might see again, a lack of correlation between what the MPs feel is right for Britain and what the ordinary paying members may feel is right for Britain. But there's also those who call for a general election. Surely now, you cannot have 3 prime ministers in 1 year and not allow the British people to have their say. So there will be more pressure for the next leader to call an election earlier than what was expected, earlier than 2024. That leader will have pressure because certainly if the second leader didn't need a mandate, the third leader will need a fresh mandate from the British people. And that's what's going to raise the stakes. Who is that prime minister who will, with that pressure, be able to call an election, and the chances for the British people electing Conservatives again increases from the current disastrous 33-point gap that they're experiencing against the Labour Party.
Musa, this issue of early elections, and I find it fascinating because people look at our politics, the South African politics, and say, maybe we need an early election. I'm not always convinced it solves the problem. You may think, well, it's quick, we kind of know where we are afterwards, someone comes out with a mandate. Not necessarily that you'd get a mandate. What's probably going to happen is that Keir Starmer's Labour Party, the opposition party in the UK, might come very close to half, but not quite over half. The Conservative Party might come very close to half. Then what? A coalition government. If you had to have an early election here, the same thing could happen.
Yes, indeed. I mean, that's always the challenge with early elections, right? And what has been spoken about a lot of is how the Conservative Party have been doing, but not necessarily how the Labour Party has been doing. In other words, do people view the Labour Party as electable? And that is another challenge in and within itself that we've not really looked at. And it is possible that happens. But the way things are going, the mood in the country is such that even among Conservative Party voters, there are doubts. There are people who are saying, look, I cannot vote for the Conservative Party. They are the party that my family has supported traditionally. But, given how they've handled, the cost of living crisis, given the challenges within the party, it's unlikely to go there. But let's assume that it leads to a coalition or a hung parliament, as it's called, where no party gets the majority. We expect that Labour would get the biggest slice of the vote and would actually then go into bed with the Liberal Democrats, who in past have been the natural, bedfellows for the Labour Party. But it's so interesting how all of that fell apart in the 2010 elections that saw the Conservatives actually go into a coalition with the Liberal Democrats. So perhaps this time lessons learned and coalitions and alliances reformed and recrystallized. So, this is where we are at so far, but it will be very interesting to see who does the Conservative Party choose? I think that's the bigger conversation. And secondly, it's also going to be about the composition of the cabinet. We have Jeremy Hunt as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Unlikely that will change regardless of who becomes Prime Minister. But the question is going to be on the other positions. Will this be a cabinet of a coalition cabinet, or will this be a coalition will this be a cabinet skewed towards one particular base of the party? That was what Liz Truss' problem was, is that she only chose people who had supported her bid to be Prime Minister, or people who stood with her ideologically, and that alienated a large chunk of her party. Now, whether the next Prime Minister will be able to bring that, and what does that mean in terms of policy decision, policy stability, and political stability? As you know, the markets have been unsure, and it's important to indeed arrest, the nervousness in the markets,
Sure.
and you need a Prime Minister who is strong.
I have a much much bigger question for you, which I think will affect British politics, our politics, and American politics, and possibly several others, which is that, in a way, this political crisis is about what may be the end of the old left-right paradigm. You went through a long period in democracies where the arguments were between the left and the right. In South Africa, the sort of just oversimplified would be the ANC and the Democratic Alliance. In Britain, it would be the Conservatives and Labour. In the US, the Democrats and the Republicans. That whole model doesn't quite work in a social media era. You have a breakdown of a sort of constituency system. That suggests to me that there may be no easy way out of this for British politics, or our politics, or midterms in a few weeks, American politics.
Indeed, the days where people's source of information only came from a newspaper, from cable news networks is over. People are receiving information from different sources, and often, depending which information they are looking at, that informs how they relate to the political system at the time. And so, indeed, when we want to look at the broader political sort of environment or democratic environment, we have to include the new forces and new actors in the political game, and now, what you then see is it's not just about what information people are looking at, it's what does this information mean for us, and you even see it in the polarization of even media today, even in British politics. You'll have the Daily Mail that may be a huge supporter of the British Prime Minister and the Conservative parties, but they're almost also shifting. And so there's now this sweet spot now in politics where there are no defined lines of ideology anymore. I heard a Conservative Party member saying, actually, in terms of economics, I'm left to Liz Truss, but in terms of security, I'm on the right of Liz Truss, calling for, a stronger migration policy and border control. And so that's really the politics that we see ourselves. And that's what's going to make even 2024 very interesting in the South African elections. How will voters vote and the choices that they will make, and how it will bring awkward bedfellows together. People who wouldn't ordinarily come together all of a sudden find themselves in the interest of power and the accumulation of power, join forces. And what does that mean about the trust in institutions to hold leaders accountable to the promises that they make? And so the question is, how strong are democratic institutions all over the world, including our own in South Africa?
Musa Mdunge, thank you so much. Really do appreciate it. Political analyst based at the University of Dundee.